Little, uh, subscribe for one of those cool handshakes that only you and like a really good friend can do. Okay. What are we talking about today? A fairy tale ending for a fake. Um, what is this? Well, it's it's not like an isekai or anything like that. It's it's basically a story in which this character is brought into this ducal family, this duke's family, um, as like a pseudo replacement. Not necessarily. They thought she was like this missing daughter. She's not, and then she ends up playing the role until they find that missing daughter. Um, I would say it's a fairly fun story, so I think a 7 is a relatively reasonable rating. It's enjoyable. Most of the characters are likable, but it's not really doing anything, that's super standout, super unique, or just such a high quality where I think it's a must read or anything. It's just a fun, solid story. Alright, let's dive a little more into it. So, this character is the one that's outside of the family but brought in. She's basically raised as their daughter for until, basically her coming of age ceremony, which is like probably about 18 or so in that world. But just so happens at that time they find the real daughter. But the twist, I guess you could say, is that this real daughter doesn't come in and like replace her or anything. This real daughter really likes her, like a lot. So the twist is basically like she was mistreated by her brothers and she was just not confident enough and self-serving enough to go to the Duke and complain, tell him about all these horrible things. And basically she's like the kind of person that's very she doesn't have a self she's too selfless. I would guess. I think the best way to put it is she's so like she was concerned with the Duke. She didn't want to bother him with her worries and things like that. Even though she was getting messed up and beaten, pushed and bullied by her brothers. Well, adoptive brothers, I guess you could say. But when this, the real daughter comes in and, shows this affection towards her, everything starts to kind of come together, right? She starts to be treated better by the Duke because this daughter, the real daughter, shows this Duke that, like, how, she's just been treated so horribly, and, he cares for her, but he just never really, he never really saw it. So now it's kind of like, oh, he's, trying to make amends and care for both of his daughters, and he's a fairly good dad. It's just he was kind of aloof to her, like he didn't really pay enough attention, and then it was a little late when he found out. So, but like the bulk of the story is basically, this new, not new, I guess, old, the original daughter, kind of turning things around for the main character and trying to make her care more about herself and her own happiness. And also the main character really, cares for this other daughter, basically. Like, they're super good sisters to each other. And it's kind of like this relationship of them all coming together and trying to, like a mix between the real daughter and the Duke coming together to help the main character have more self-respect and, have a lot better of a life than she used to. And it's kind of like this... It's just a sweet story of seeing her slowly take her life back and become a happier person. And of course there's other characters in conflict, but that would be like the focus of the story. As far as like full types of characters, I mean, there's, you know, her brothers that bullied her, then there's like some other ladies, like noble women that bully her, but most of that isn't necessarily directly dealt with by her. Like, the brothers are taken out by her sister and the Duke, you know, like they constantly get reprimanded for all of her poor treatment and things like that. You kind of see them slowly start to pull back, and I don't know if they necessarily regret what they did, but they're kind of trying to understand that they, you know, shouldn't do those things anymore. And as far as like the ladies, I mean, it's kind of like a mix of who's dealing with them. That is when she starts to get a little more self-respect, so she's trying to fight back a little bit against these noble women, but it's still a little bit, you know, she's been one way for so long that it's hard to just switch, like, you know, it's nothing. So it's kind of like a combined effort between her and, you know, the people like the male lead and things like that, all coming together to deal with these evil noble men and women, right? I would say the only other major aspect of the story would probably be she has like magic. The it's kind of like a side element, I guess, at a lot of points in the story, but she has magic abilities, and this is kind of where we get introduced to the male lead. She has magic abilities, but she didn't know about them because apparently magic only manifests when you like kind of reach that like apex of sadness and depression and like emotional, you know, just energy, and then you develop magic. So she didn't realize until a little bit later. She ends up kind of suffering a bit because her magic is like overwhelming to her. Therefore, they call in the male lead, who is a mage that is there to help her control this. So this is like the other aspect of the story. So the bulk of it is like, you know, her, the Duke, and his real daughter all coming together and kind of having this like build up of trust between each other. The Duke were like, you know, kind of repenting for his past actions and helping her, and then her kind of trying to better her, you know, self and become more, I don't know, just more interested in her own well-being. But then there's this other, like I said, there's this other aspect of magic where, because of her terrible treatment and poor, you know, situation, she ends up developing this magic. She needs this male lead to come in and help her control it, and then he kind of ends up being like a supporter for her, and almost like a, I guess you could say, lifeline, where, you know, he understands her situation. He's trying to help her, and, you know, he's also kind of trying to like break her out of her shell of being locked away, basically. So I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like a little. It's not like the focus, I would say, most of the time, but it's kind of like an extra tool in the author's box to get things going. I will say, though, with the magic aspect, there comes a little bit of a thing that's a tad annoying to me, where magic is known to be something that's coveted. Like, magic is something that's very, like, well respected and supported in their kingdom. And of course there would be dissenters to this, but the majority have this in a, you know, a higher light. But like once they first discover this magic, like they're not as quick as I would expect to get on it. Like she almost seems to want to hide it, which I think is a little weird, because you would think like, oh, well, people treat her poorly because she's this like, you know, this fake. So if they found out, oh, she has magical abilities, then, I mean, their tune would change to a degree, because then they would realize like, oh, okay, well, magic has a lot of value. She has magic, therefore it's kind of like, you know, an extra boon. Now, They do end up finding out that she has magic later on. Now, I don't really want to get into what her abilities are and things like that, but later on, this, does kind of get exposed to some degree. Like, people slowly figure out more and more, then, and it does have the effect of improving her reputation. So again, it kind of makes me think it's a little silly that they didn't do it earlier, but it's a minor plot point. It's just like in a story progression, It's kind of like you would think that it would come here, but it ends up showing up here, right? Like, I would have expected, like, okay, they found out she has magic, and then they show that right away. When, in reality, they find out that she has magic, and then everyone else finds out, like, way later. It's just a weird little thing that happens in the story. Not really, like, a massive issue. It's just... I find it odd. Alright. I guess we can just end with the old SAE. What is the SAE? Well, it's story, art, enjoyment. Story-wise, it's not really anything special, but I do like a slightly different thing where, like, the real daughter likes this replacement daughter, and they end up having, like, an actual good bond. So I think I'll give it a 7, where, like, everything else is written in a pretty good quality fashion, and there's a slightly interesting idea that's placed in there, so I think a 7 would be fair. Art-wise, it really doesn't stand out to me. It's okay. The designs aren't really anything special, and I don't think the art's, like, super high quality or anything. It's just really not I think I'm gonna give it a 6. It's just okay. Like, it's not average. It's like it's relatively well done, but it's so plain and just really doesn't stand out to me. Enjoyment wise, I think like a 7's fair. It's a fun read. I enjoyed reading it. I like seeing their character dynamics. I like seeing progression in characters. I like seeing, a good familiar relationship with at least some family members. That's not really that common in these kinds of stories. Yeah, I would say it's pretty good. So overall, I think a 7 is probably a reasonable rating. I would say, like, the story is relatively decent, like, no real issues. The art, it's not the best, but it's not the worst. It's just, it's not special. So, like, I don't think it's, like, a draw. Enjoyment-wise, I mean, I like the idea. It's relatively fun, and it's not, like, it's a satisfying short little... So yeah, I think, like, with the 7, 6, 7, I think a 7 is a fair rating. I think you could lean toward a 6, but I feel like that'd be a little unfair. I think it's a relatively decent story, and I think if you see it, it's worth reading. I wouldn't go out of my way. I'm not jumping the gun or anything. I don't think you should, be biting at the bit for it, but I think it's a fun read. But yeah, I think that's about it. I'd appreciate it if you could like, comment, subscribe, maybe leave another story you want me to read down below. Even if I've read it, I'll read it again. I don't care. And yeah, I'll see ya.